The presidential race has been exceptionally tight between the leaders of the two main political blocs, incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. As initial results are coming in, the state-run Anadolu News Agency reported that preliminary results showed Mr. Erdogan in the lead, but opposition leaders dismissed those figures as misleading. And Mr. Erdogan's main challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu wrote on Twitter, "We are leading." Recep Tayyip Erdogan, a towering figure in Turkey who has vexed Western allies, is facing the fiercest political challenge of his 20 years in power. Election results could reshape the country's domestic and foreign policies. The winner will set the course for the country of 85 million, a NATO member with one of the world's 20 largest economies and a wide array of economic and political ties across Asia, Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. This is All 24 News Turkey Election Special.
رجب طيب أردوغان كمال كليجداroğlu.
Anxiety and anticipation during all this day.
Qui pourront faire pencher la balance d'une part ou d'une autre.
And before we bring in our guests, let's have a listen to some opinion in the streets or the Turkish streets on the election.
The election is showing the importance of democracy. Our votes will show how we want to be governed.
I came here and voted in the early hours of the morning with the hope that the best would happen for our country. As you can see, a lot of people are coming now. I am hoping for the best for our nation.
Good luck to our country and our people. God willing, it will be a democratic election. What can I say? Good luck in the name of our country.
If the governing party stay in power, the situation is going to be worse. The opposition should take control and improve the situation. The governing party has stayed in power for too long. 20 years is a really long period of time. I think it's enough. They should leave.
Of course, my ideas have changed since the last election. We feel insulted now. We are tired of the constant sayings and empty words. Of course, there are good things President Erdogan did, but lately they started to look down on and insult the nation. It is hard to deal with after a certain age.
And according to preliminary results of the first round vote of Turkey's presidential election, it showed Erdogan leading the polls with 49%, who reached nearly over 50%, then dropped again. On the other hand, his main rival in these elections, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, actually lost the presidential race after getting that was Sinan Ogan, sorry, let me just catch up on that again. So, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu comes second with 44% count rate. Meanwhile, Sinan Ogan lost the first round. It's worth mentioning that the fourth candidate, Mr. Muharrem İnce, withdrew from the presidential race on Thursday. Elections in Turkey, which is scheduled to hold a second round, concluded on Sunday amid tight contest between the incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his main rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. The second round is expected to take place on May 28th after both candidates failed to reach 50% threshold. Islam said with more.
It has been a long day for Turkey. Electorates cast their ballots on Sunday in an atmosphere that showed a high turnout, which marked the electoral process amid a convenient logistic and technical conditions across Turkey, including the biggest cities and even earthquake-affected areas. Due to the importance of this election, it grabbed international media attention. However, many Western media outlets have been accused of biased reporting, in which some of them depicted Erdogan negatively as an attempt to influence the public opinion and the outcome of polls.
We will not allow our domestic politics to be directed by the covers of magazines that serve as operation tools for global powers, and we will not tolerate any finger pointing towards our national will.
On the other hand, opposition leaders are accusing state-run Anadolu News Agency of reporting misleading figures, with Erdogan's main rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu tweeting, for that matter, "We are ahead." Being a Republican coalition leader, Erdogan, who has been ruling the country since 2003, faces the toughest political challenge in his ruling period as the elections are moving to a second round. However, his political bloc wins the parliamentary majority. Based on Sunday's results, the presidential election is heading for a runoff vote on May 28th, with neither of the two main candidates reaching the 50% threshold needed for an outright win.
All right, let's bring in our guests. Joining me here in studio is Dr. Abdenoor Toumi. Thank you for agreeing to be with us. He's a Maghreb Studies researcher at Osam, Ankara, Turkey. And via Skype is Denis Betray, Turkish journalist in Ukraine from Kiev, expert on Eastern Europe matters. We also have Serkan Ural, foreign relations, global strategy and political advisor from Istanbul, as well as Ms. Valeria Skuto, principal analyst, editor on MENA region and Turkey at Sebi Line Ltd from London. And via phone is Mr. Ethan Dinsher, research director, MENA region at London Politica from Boston. Ma'am and gentlemen, thank you for agreeing to be with us. Let me start with you here, Dr. Abdenoor Toumi. How or why do you think these elections took such great momentum in comparison to other elections in Turkey?
Good evening, sir, and thank you for having me. It is indeed a historical election, and it's the most exciting election that the Turks have experienced since the foundation of the Republic, and also since the creation of the multi-party system in the 50s. As far as the dynamic and the mechanism go of this special election, it is indeed part of it is the principal character in the story, which implies on the outgoing President Recep Erdogan, who did indeed shape the political life and spectrum in his country in the last 2 decades. And also because of his achievements that put him in front to the point where he became a target not only from the classic opposition, which it's a part of this healthy democratic process that is taking place in Turkey. And by the way, Turks have shown to the entire world about the maturity of their political culture in terms of democracy. They did show this in the attempt failed coup of July 2016, and today is the answer. The turnout, it's historical, participation that has reached the 90%. And it's, I would say, amazing number in the entire MENA region in comparison with other countries where they held elections, which the majority of those, the people in these countries don't show up to the polls, and ideally if they can reach the 10%. So this is today, is this 90%? It's not that, let's say, mythical number that what the Western media did portray Turkey and notably the President Erdogan as an autocrat and a dictator. No, it is indeed the democratic process in Turkey is healthy and is making progress. Now, the impact of this election, or the dynamic of the campaign of this election, was also tried to narrow by the opposition, the candidate who tried to use the economic aspect where he thought his opponent, he might fail, and also he can catch him. I don't think the people today who did vote for either one, there are 3 candidates. Of course, you were fourth, and the one, Mr. Muharrem did withdraw. So the 3 main candidates, but the game was between 2 projects. These 2 projects one was, you would give me more one more term, and I will continue with my achievements. The other one was, let's stop what the ongoing president has been achieved in the last 2 decades and turn back Turkey to the pre-2002, 2003 time, where Turkey at that moment was in deep crisis politically and even economically. The irony, and politics is full of irony. President Erdogan, when he came to power, or he entered public life politically, and he became prime minister in 2003, and his party was elected, I mean, the MPs of his parties were elected in 2002. They were strong, and they as a result, to respond to the economic instability and political instability. Today, Turkey is politically stable, but economically is shaky. So President Erdogan is doing all his best and also taking this bold decision that is a challenge for him. What makes the inflation crisis to last longer, which is a tiring process and frustration process frustration feeling for the voter who is today and decided, should we continue for continuity with President Erdogan, and we listen to him?
Should we opt for a change? Very clear, Dr. Abdel-Nour.
And just one last point, speaking of the change, is very interesting. On the other hand, the candidate of the opposition, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, he didn't really represent the change because he has been in politics for so long. The fight of today between the opposition and President Erdogan was clear. It's anybody but Erdogan. And this, we saw it in the awkward or the odd coalition of the nation alliance that have the candidate of Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu.
Excellent. We will delve deeper into such details, Dr. Abdel-Nour Toumi. I would like to shed the light on an interesting matter with you, Mr. Serkan Oral. Since our distinguished guest just previously stated he believes in the democratic process of these elections, but there were significant discrepancies in the reported results at the beginning between the pro-government AA and the opposition, ANCA, the only two sources who were providing the updates. How did you personally learn about these results, and how did you find them?
The AA is the governmental company, and also the opposition leader told that they are just taking the votes, showing Mr. Tayyip forward, and they say they don't let their votes come front. The other one is the ANCA, more oppositional news agency. Also, they are providing the votes, but especially the opposition party leader just announced that we had all the signed documents, and it shows that we are leading the presidency. So, according to your interviews with the Turkish people on the street, they said it's a long day. I can tell you that it's a long night. Still, the votes are counting and not finished. But according to the latest situation, we can say that the Turkish diaspora will make the appearance on the votes. If the votes coming from the abroad, the people living in Germany, in France, in Holland, in EU, or in Qatar, or in Algeria, they vote for Turkish elections, and now maybe 0.5 or 0.7 make a difference for Mr. Tayyip to get the presidency. But thank you for your guest and my colleague that I would like to add a global vision why these elections are important because of the region. Mr. Tayyip says we have a good relations with Putin, and Mr. Kemal says we will have a good relations with United States, and we will back and we will stay in the West. So there is a very important difference between two sides. That is really a milestone. Why these elections are important? Because normally in every election happened in Turkey, always Turkish parties act with the West countries. But now, with Mr. Tayyip and colleagues, they have exactly very important role with Putin and also with Iran, Syria, and China. This means the new Asia. So, but Mr. Kemal, the opposition leader, refuses these issues, and this means what will happen? What will happen for the Russia and Ukraine war? And what will happen about the North African countries' relations, including Libya, Sudan, Egypt, Algeria? What will be the future? You know, Turkey has troops all around world, more than 15 countries, including Qatar, for example. And also during this process, Turkey has the important Karabakh war. Remember, the Azerbaijan got the Karabakh with the drones, Turkish Bayraktars, and in Ukraine the Bayraktars are very important, you know, the drones. So the new opposition leader is not close to this national defense industry. So these are the really important policies, if anything change in the morning.
Very nice, and thank you for raising multiple questions, Mr. Ural. Let me include Ms. Valeria Scuto, pre-election polling suggested incumbent President Recep Tayyip Erdogan faced the toughest re-election battle of his 2 decades leading the NATO member country. How could the election result impact EU ties, according to you?
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. Most definitely, it's been closely followed by the EU and European countries, and there is overall a sensation that should President Erdogan lose even in a second round, that this could have a positive sort of boost for relations with the EU, with Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu as Turkey's president. However, that being said, there are certain sticking points that Kılıçdaroğlu will face as president of Turkey and a 6-party alliance, namely cohesiveness on certain EU policies. However, a loss for President Erdogan could mean increased discussions over visa liberalization and possibly a boost of accession talks and sort of a closeness, a growing closeness with EU mechanisms. There will certainly be a discussion on migration, and that is something likely to happen regardless of the results. But that's why the EU hasn't really sort of pushed for any candidate. It has been quite neutral beyond the headlines that we've seen on newspapers. Overall, official statements have been quite scarce on the elections per se, beyond sort of stating that the need for a free and fair electoral process. So there's certainly room and overall some muted optimism in case of a leadership change for relations with the EU. I think it is no secret to say that the relation between President Erdogan and sort of EU leadership has been difficult and has significantly soured at times. However, complicated portfolios on Greece, Cyprus, and the Balkans, and those tensions that we've seen over the past months, also within NATO, are likely to stay and don't have a sort of silver bullet fix that also Kılıçdaroğlu can tackle.
Very nice indeed. And here, let me bring in Mr. Ethan Dincher. According to observers, Mr. Dincher, social media was flooded with deep fakes, and experts are warning against the use of AI And here, just to remind of the video of Kilic Darulu speaking English, mostly earning him supporters over 2 weeks ago. How potentially, according to you, can AI contend, meddle in Turkey's election and any other election for that matter?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I don't think, although you are correct about the deep fakes with Kılıç Daroğlu, I do not see that this has any potential role to meddle in the election. As we've seen from both Erdogan and Kılıç Daroğlu now, as vote counts are slowing down, everyone is urging supporters to stay at the vote boxes and at the ballot boxes until every single last vote is counted. So currently, I don't think that there is any potential role within Turkey and these very pressing elections for AI to have an issue. However, we have...
And what do you have to say about the claims that the election has been meddled in? I mean, we see, for example, the opposition accusing the agency, that is Anadolu, a news agency, of being biased perhaps and, let's say, just releasing figures that are misleading.
I mean, this is true. They are releasing these statements saying that the figures are misleading. And we know that whenever a ballot box is contested, those votes do not turn into data. So the Anadolu agency is being accused of this representation crisis and meddling the representation. That does not mean the actual votes are meddled, but it means that the representation of the data is being meddled currently.
Let me include here Denis Baktay, a journalist that is based in Kiev. Mr. Denis Baktay, how could an opposition win impact EU ties according to you, I'm saying?
So now, first of all, those results are now interim results, not official. So I think until the morning, the situation may change.
Yeah, but let's just imagine a scenario in which the opposition wins. How do you think this opposition win can actually impact EU ties, especially vis-à-vis Ukraine here?
Yes, first of all, I agree with the other guests of that program, especially with Mr. Serkan, that the international dimension of those elections cannot be ignored because now the government has better ties with Russia, while the opposition or the leader of the main opposition party has better ties with the West. And they promise, the opposition, the main opposition leader, Kılıç Daroğlu, promises restoring relations with the West and with the EU. So in the case of their victory, they will try to pursue another kind of policy with the EU. But will they be able to succeed or not? This will be another question, because it also should be reminded that, yes, the leader of the opposition promises restoring relations with the EU. However, a large part of his electorate does not support tense relations with the EU. This is another question.
Very nice indeed. And as we're watching right now, there is a gathering here awaiting outside, a big crowd awaiting for the speech of Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And let me just include this report in which we put the internal file into the limelight. This report is signed by Usama Ayati.
Turkish presidential and parliamentary elections were held amid critical domestic issues. The elections are considered one of the most important elections in modern Turkey's 100-year history. Public outcry has risen over faltering economy, rising inflation and cost of living crisis, the rise of an anti-refugee sentiment with a shortage of housing and shelters in the quick-hit provinces, and the Turkish Kurds recognition issue. Erdogan announced a series of spending measures to bring temporary relief to those hardest hit by inflation, including raising minimum wages and pensions.
This election is very important for our democracy, the future of our republic, and our children. I came here to cast my vote. I hope it will be good for the people.
Political adversaries say the government was slow to respond to the earthquake disaster and that its failure to enforce building codes is to blame for the high death toll. Kılıçdaroğlu-led opposition alliance and other opposition parties have vowed to repatriate Syrians within 2 years. However, Erdogan's government has begun constructing thousands of brick homes in Turkish-controlled areas of northern Syria to encourage voluntary returns. The opposition has also vowed to omit the Turkish Kurds from the statute of terrorist organizations, which was decided under the governance of Erdogan. Despite all of this discourse, the economy and high inflation that has eroded families' purchasing power remains the main influential factor for people's will for change. The campaign of Kılıçdaroğlu gave important focus on the aim of switching the country's governance to a more democratic state after criticizing Erdogan's leadership and describing it as a dictatorship. Erdogan on his part stated that the country needs to protect the democracy convenient for the Turkish people away from the blind import of the Western democracy.
I see May 14 elections as democracy celebration, where we protect the future of our country, the achievements of our nation, and the goals of our state. Hey Turkey, hey Istanbul, hey Umraniye, are you with us in this struggle?
The tight race towards presidency has put Erdogan in the top position in Turkey again, and the country will walk towards the continuity of economic measures and spendings on the relief of the Turks, and it's considered good news for the Syrian refugees to have choice to stay or to leave the country.
Let me get back to you, Dr. Abdenour Toumi. It seems that internally there are a lot of cards the two candidates can play on. But which ones do you think are going to be influential, seeing the country economic turmoil that it's grappling with?
It is indeed. I mean, the second round will be crucial for both candidates, but it particularly will be for the outgoing president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, because don't forget, it's his first draw, if I may say that, in all his electoral fights, and he won 10 elections in a row, and usually it's, let's put this metaphor, with a heavyweight fight by knockout. Now it's going to the points. So indeed, the card of the economic card will be on the field for the matter of the narrative and also the premise of the candidate of the opposition, because he thinks now, or it gives him a good position to argue about the economic, and then he will challenge President Erdogan that if you didn't win as you predicted in the first round, this is because of your failure economic policies, and this is the case. But the question here, does he have a policy, how he will manage this inflation crisis that is killing the Turkish economy? Now, he can, let's say, in a week or so, but in 2 weeks, it's a lifetime in politics. And don't forget, the outgoing President Erdogan is a political beast and a communication beast. So he knows how to shape the narrative of the second round message and how he will galvanize all his people who did also think that they can wrap up this fight in the first round. Now it is, I mean, we can say it's a semi-surprise for him and his entourage and also for his voters. But the main dynamic will be, does the candidate of the Nation Alliance, Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, could deliver, and how? Because he hasn't been in power for so long, and his party has been in opposition for so long. I mean, they haven't led the country. And ironically, even the candidate of the opposition, Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu, who is again criticizing harshly the economic policy of President Erdogan, he has in his alliance, in this odd alliance, Ali Babachan, who was the mastermind of President Erdogan economy program. So he's going to play on this issue. Also, he can, the opposition can bring the card of the refugees, the Syrian refugees. Actually, they don't have the status of the refugees according to the UN definition or the Geneva Convention. They are considered our guests by the Turkish government, which did welcome them, these people who left their country because of the civil war in Syria. This has become a serious debate and a challenge, again, another challenge for President Erdogan. There is a third point, is also how he will manage quickly the aftermath of the earthquake of last winter. And because, which is again another, irony, he did score well in those area. I mean, the party, the People Alliance, the candidate President Recep Tayyip Erdogan did score well in those provinces, which the candidate of the opposition did weigh in on this as a weakest point he can challenge. So there is this dynamic, socio-economic dynamic that will be in front in these 2 weeks and will be very, very tough moments. Actually, it will be tough moments for both candidates. Nonetheless, now there is a third element appeared in this equation, who is the candidate of the ancestors parties, who could be the kingmaker of the elections.
Excellent. Now, let me turn to you, Mr. Serkan Ural. If the outgoing president promises to bring inflation down to a figure that will get Turkey out of this crisis for good, his main rival foresees a return to a strict monetary policy and central bank independence as a solution. Which of the suggested solutions is more logical and away from void campaign promises, if we may say so, according to you?
Well, with the huge, after the huge earthquake and the inflation, the currency collapse, these opposition parties should easily get the elections, but this not happened. So by these elections, there are simple things that we can understand. Turkish people says, okay, we respect to Erdogan, especially the 11 cities that the earthquake hit, 9 of them supported Erdogan. That is an interesting issue. And the other thing that with this inflation, the COVID issues, the currency problem, that is the $1 is 22 Turkish liras. This is the highest of this years. And also the more than 15 million refugees in Turkey. So these are the things that makes Erdogan's way not easy. Under these conditions, the opposition leader should easily get the votes. And all the polls were saying that, but this not happened yet. So do the Turkish people believe in the opposition leaders' economical words? It seems they just believe two important political figures who won the Istanbul and Ankara cities from Erdogan, the mayor İmamoğlu and the mayor Yavaş. They are becoming an important figure in these elections against Erdogan, maybe more than Kılıçdaroğlu. And the other thing is, for the economical developments, whatever who will win, it doesn't matter that the currency will get higher. The economical programs will not be easily solving the issues until the 6 months or 1 year. So everybody knows that the house rents and prices will go up, and it will not be easy for the Turkish people. But the thing is that what we see with this the election, that in Turkey the patriots and the nationalists are getting more power. You see, Mr. Ogan got 5%, and he says that he told that we will send all the refugees to Syria. And what Erdogan says, we will go and fight with the YPG terrorists in Syria. What about Kılıçdaroğlu? And at that time, there will be no war against the terrorists when Mr. Kemal gets the leadership. So the thing is that for the region, political and economical problems, conflicts are going, but this means there is a trust for both, but there is not a clear change demand from the Turkish the people to these elections. But we can see that the Turkish people are giving a reaction to the party that is linked with the terrorist organizations. Is the HDP, the new name is the Green Party. So the nationalists are getting more interest from the Turkish people. This means it's not a national, it's an international result that Turkey in the morning will have a decision to go west or to go to Asia again, and maybe some conflicts with NATO. Maybe, neither the candidate reaches the 50% yet. Maybe after 15 days.
So the scenario is still open, Mr. Serkan Oral. Of course, we will delve deeper into other details, but let me include Mr. Deniz Baktay here. Promises to resolving the economic hardships and inflation, one would logically think would affect the result of the ballot still. While the ruling party promises houses in a year, which will have a long repayment term, the opposition is proposing that they get them for free. Do you think such promise can be kept?
It also might have some effect, I suppose.
I mean, if we talk about such economic, let's say, promises to bring some kind of a change used as a pressure card, Mr. Deniz Baktay, do you think that these, are just void promises in the campaign, or they could actually turn it into something concrete in the ground? They can materialize it.
Well, maybe it might be realized. However, maybe we can assume that although opposition had some success in this campaign, in some aspects it also has some failures, I suppose, because they tried to gather everybody, every kind of oppositionist figures. However, they tried to unite everybody, but for example, this opposition consists of different people of different ideologies. So while they tried to make alliance with some of those opposition figures, other oppositionists went away. For example, because of such tactics, I think nationalists, they left the rank of the main opposition party. So this is one of the reasons why the opposition candidate couldn't win in the first round, I think.
Very nice indeed. And let me include Mr. Ethan Dincher here. How effective are the pressure cards for the opposition, according to you, such as, politically speaking, the Kurdish or the Turkish Kurds issue, the refugee file, and the, let's say, parliament's powers? To what extent does the Syrian refugee problem, for example, affect the mood of the Turkish voters?
I think it really does affect it a lot, and we do see it in Kılıçdaroğlu's plans. As you mentioned earlier, he did say that all Syrian refugees would be returned back within 2 years. I think this is a very different rhetoric than President Erdogan is currently doing, with planning to rebuild and voluntarily create the channels by which Syrian refugees can return. So I do agree with you that it is a very big playing card, and I think combined with the current economic crisis that Turkey is undergoing, the Syrian refugee crisis is only adding to that in many opposition voters' minds.
Mm-hmm. And just to shed some light on what is the media depicting here, let me include Ms. Valeria Scuto. Why is Western media depicting Erdogan-run country as a country in which democracy is eroded?
Well, I think the media and Western headlines have also followed sort of Erdogan's moves to concentrate increasingly executive powers, and the increasing sidelined role of the parliament is something that has been looked at with concern. We've seen this also happening in other countries in the Middle East, and sort of the parliament as a democratic institution is a vital pillar of a functioning democracy. So therefore, there has definitely been increasingly concerns over a presidential model that does not have checks and balances.
Very nice. The elections in Turkey are of major significance, not only for the future of the country, but also for the regional and international scene. Let's follow the report signed by Mariam Ziyan, and we get back to discussion.
Turkey is choosing between two competitors in the most decisive elections in the history of the country. The election is of great significance not only for Turkey, but also for the regional and international scene. Ankara is a key regional and global player given its foreign policy and its position straddling Asia and Europe. Throughout the years, Ankara has built partnership with the West while simultaneously focusing on the Middle East. It hasn't abandoned supporting Palestine despite its decision to restore diplomatic relations with the Zionist entity. It has increased its presence in the African continent by different channels such as trade, investment, education, military cooperation, and soft power. Recently, Turkey has presented itself as a middleman in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, supplying weapons to Ukraine, while refusing to sanction Russia. It has also hosted some 4 million Syrians battling a major cost of living and has moved towards the normalization of ties with Syria. Erdogan, the longest-serving president, promises to decrease inflation and to continue normalizing ties in the wider region, while Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu pledged to reinforce more traditional economic policies and to restore trust with the West, including his willingness to make Turkey join the EU and to accept Sweden's membership to NATO. Turkish-style elections are followed worldwide, with preliminary results showing prospects of a runoff vote in 2 weeks' time.
Speaking of international matter, the question that now arises, will Turkish policy towards different continents change? And here, let me shed some light on Africa. Do you think that maybe if the opposition wins or Erdogan continues, what are the scenarios that we will have, I mean, towards Africa in particular and the world in general?
And indeed, I mean, the prospects of foreign policy is a major element in the general policy of Turkey, particularly in the last, I would say, decades, and how the Turkish foreign policy has been active in Africa and in Western Africa, and also in deep Africa, because Turkey has initiated diplomatic relations with more than 39 countries, and even the latest visits of President Erdogan since he became president, he visited more than 19 African countries. And nonetheless, the Turkey or Ankara doesn't have an integral Africa policy. It does initiate its foreign policy on bilateral relations and where its national interest is needs to be tackled. For example, North Africa foreign policy is not the same like it's in Western Africa foreign policy, and also in Southern African foreign policy. But which is here an important point, that Turkey entered Africa from the east of Africa, entered from Somalia at the moment where Somalia was seen as a failed state and living under anarchy and, political instability and economic bankruptcy and so on. So Turkey did support a great deal the Somalia and entered from that gate, and of course extending its imperatives and foreign policy mechanism in the region, and also position itself in North Africa, notably in Libya, and having in extraordinary relations with Algeria following in the aftermath of last year's visit of President Abdelmajid Tebboune to Turkey, and where this rapprochement, Turkish-Algeria rapprochement, has or launched, enhanced also the dynamic of help to solve, or at least open the door to solve some crises, notably the Libyan dossier and the instability, the political impasse in Tunisia. And now these two countries, Algeria, these two pivotal countries, Algeria and Turkey, could have or would play a major role in, I would argue, in the Sudanese crisis. So, and Turkey also entered Africa with the parameter of a humanitarian foreign policy and education foreign policy based on its TICA, the Turkish International Development Agency activities in the continent, and also through the education via its Ma'arif schools that are implemented in many African countries. And this indeed follows Turkey's parallel foreign policy or equilibrist foreign policy, software and hardware together, and speaking on hardware, helping African countries in terms of armament and so on, and selling their drones to Sahel countries like Mali and Burkina Faso lately.
And if we talk about the Russian-Ukrainian war, how is this going to change? I mean, if Recep Tayyip Erdogan, of course, wins, maybe we're going to see the same policy, but what if the opposition takes the lead?
If the opposition wins, will change the entire dynamic, not of foreign policy, but on this dossier, on this thorny and complex issue, because the charisma of Tayyip Erdogan is not the charisma, if it doesn't exist, of Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. And also, the candidate of the opposition, Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, did show his card early for leaning toward the West war narrative, unlike President Erdogan, who did position himself early in the conflict as a mediator, to be a credible mediator and trustworthy mediator between Russia and Ukraine. And this is due to the excellent relations that he established with President Putin. And both leaders know each other very, very well, because both have been in power for more than 20 years now, and both are showing the same challenge toward the West in terms of independency, and also in terms of kind of justice, international justice policy toward the southern countries. In other words, both are trying to look in for kind of a north-south credible dialogue, and we saw that how President Erdogan uses this in practically all his speeches, international speeches. And we don't forget when he wrote that book about the world is bigger than five, and this is like sending a clear message to the superpowers and the five permanent countries at the security, the UN Security Council. So that President Putin also is criticizing the UN function, and also the injustice of the West policies toward the southern countries. So this dynamic will help to, first of all, open up a channel of discussion in the time being on the ongoing war in Ukraine, and also creates a new dynamic in the superpower struggle, and create a new, if possibly, international world order that is already on the horizon.
Very nice. And Ms. Valeria Scuto, in the event that the opposition raises all its differences to confront Erdogan as a united front, do you think Erdogan will resort to making concessions, or will he continue on his current policies?
I think in these 2 weeks' time, Erdogan is likely to focus much more on domestic policies rather than foreign policy. So in that sense, I think there might be less discussions over EU ties and NATO. Particularly, Sweden's membership to NATO has been of big discussion if Erdogan might actually accelerate that in terms of opening up to a certain part of the voters and a more West EU stance. However, I do feel that these 2 weeks will be much more focused on the contentious issues that voters have raised as something that really matters to them, mostly on economic matters, inflation, the rising cost of living, and the Syrian refugees and within the country.
But Ms. Valeria Scuto, technically, Recep Tayyip Erdogan emerged as a winner, let's say, or at least someone who made certain achievements at the international arena. And this actually portrayed him toward his nationals as someone who's worth the vote. However, how is this change, I mean, if a change happens and the opposition wins, convenient to the West?
I think it'll be difficult to say. The EU and Erdogan have had a difficult relationship. That being said, it has been beneficial to both and transactional, particularly on irregular migration. So I think that's why overall on the EU side, we haven't seen too much discussion beyond the sort of the optimism from certain areas and certain countries over a possible Kılıçdaroğlu win to improve and boost ties. However, the EU has certainly changed how it conducts its foreign policy and has managed to compartmentalize sort of its different portfolios. So I don't necessarily think that an opposition win would necessarily be beneficial. As I've said it before, it's not a silver bullet to improving ties. I think Erdogan has acted as a reliable mediator in several occasions, and particularly in Russia-Ukraine. Losing Erdogan as an interlocutor with Putin could be something that will shift the balance, and therefore also the Western leverage and role, and also the role of the US in this conflict. So in that sense, Erdogan does have a lot of political capital, which is why this election is so important on a global scale.
What about you, Mr. Ethan Dinscher? Do you think that these achievements of Erdogan actually is going to make him win the elections, perhaps, for those who are aware of what is happening internationally speaking? And if the opposition win, is it going to change any of the stalled negotiations for Turkish accession to the European Union?
Yeah, so I think currently most of the Turkish population is so focused on the domestic issues. I mean, many are aware of President Erdogan's ambitious foreign policy over the last 2 decades of his rule. However, since the earthquakes and the economic crises of the past 2 years, I would argue that most of the Turkish domestic population is really focused on trying to improve their own material well-being. That being said, I mean, I think if an opposition win does happen, I am still skeptical that there would be an EU talk for accessions, right? It's been almost 15 years since the talks have fizzled out. That's not to say that a Kılıçdaroğlu win and accession to power would not kind of catalyze more friendly ties with the West, but I do not think that an EU accession talk
are likely in the near future.
And what about you, Mr. Serkan Oral? Do you think that Turkey will do without EU accession, seeing that it has made such improvements at many levels, and there is a hope that arises that perhaps Turkey is going to emerge strong and independent?
Exactly, the Turkish relations with West is every time so complicated, even the EU issues. Whatever will be leading Turkey, I don't think that the stability in EU is helpful for Turkey. Even there are lots of problems in the EU, and for Turkish people, the economical issues are getting the priority. But the thing is that if the opposition leader gets power, then this means the Turkish win-win policy will change, even in EU or even in Africa. For example, you had very important questions about relations with Sahara. It's a historical relations. I would like to mention that, and just the grain corridor, for example, from Ukraine to Africa, is the big success with Turkish and United Nations cooperation. That is important. And the second thing is, I think Turkey is more familiar to the Arab world, more than France or the West countries. And also, I hope that the things will be peaceful in Turkey after the elections, and Turkish people really demand good relations with the African countries also. The thing is that the conflict with the NATO countries, example is France and Greece. The role in Libya, for example, for Turkish troops and for Turkish support to Libya, or the new relations with Egypt, or with Tunisia or Algeria, or with the Gulf countries. These are the rising issues for Turkish economical development. It's
so
not
if any retreat happens, well, let's say from Turkey, it would not be because the opposition won, maybe it's just because they are facing internally economic difficulties. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly, that is the point. And the second point, Turkey did lots of improvements for the national defense industry, and also for the gas and oil issues, and also very important relations, the energy relations with Russia. For becoming a source of European countries. And the other is the Mediterranean issue, the Cyprus issue, the East Med gas pipeline projects are all fall down by the pressure of Erdogan. So something will change for the regional relations. So if any change happens in Turkey, that will be interesting challenge for Americans leader Biden's speech that happened nearly 1 or 2 years ago, that we will support the oppositions against Erdogan to get rid of him. So this means the new government, if will get the leading, then there will be very warm relations with the United States, and this will change all the things in the Mediterranean Sea and also with the Black Sea issues.
What do we understand, Dr. Abdenour Toumi, when we see the United States of America president saying that he will back the opposition against Erdogan? What is the hint here?
The hint is clear. It's anybody but Erdogan. And we have to ask the question, I mean, why all these, why they hate him? The answer is, I would say, too simple, but it's a little bit complicated, because if one remembers what happened, then Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan in Davos summit in 2006, and when he publicly challenged the president of the colonial state, Shimon Peres, at that moment, where the colonial state's army was massacring the children and the women and the civilians in Gaza. And the Turks, they have this expression of 1 minute, 1 minute. In Turkish, bir dakika, bir dakika. It is very important. And this is what the shift that the West were surprised and actually to some extent shocked to see a leader coming from the other side, from the Muslim country and third world country, who is challenging the world. So at that moment where all these hatreds started against the one we did believed in him, because 2-3 years before, actually in 2006, 2003, then Prime Minister President Erdogan was welcomed, warm welcome in the White House and by some newcom think tanks in Washington, D.C. So after that, they started to review their, let's say, thinking about this new, young leader, energetic new leader who's believing in the democratic process, who is ending the political crisis and military coups in Turkey, offering a possibility to new generation of youth, political elite, who will be the pro-Westerns and so on. But after that, President Erdogan also, besides his political belief, he did get it, speaking of the EU, that we will be never in the EU, period. And this is not him, because of some Western leaders, and this bold statement was made by Valéry Giscard d'Estaing, the French president in the 70s, in the 90s by Helmut Kohl, and in 2000 by Nicolas Sarkozy. So this is that moment, and Turkey has been trying and knocking the door of the EU many times. Unfortunately, it was pushed away. So President Erdogan, then Prime Minister Erdogan, and actually it's ironic in these elections because the brain of his foreign policy, Davutoglu, who was instigator of this foreign policy, today is sitting with Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu. So it is.
See the irony, yes.
It is very ironic. But the point is, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan did understand, and he reoriented or reshaped all his entire foreign policy, and he headed toward East, and indeed keeping a foot in the West. In other terms, he was balancing between the East and the West, but not with the heart, but with a reason, as we say.
And I'm curious over what Valeria Scuto actually thinks about your statement. I would like to include her to shed perhaps more light on the Western point of view regarding Recep Erdogan as a president and a person.
I think, as your guest has mentioned, it's a difficult a relationship that has also evolved over time. And I think, as it was previously mentioned, that while at the beginning the push to join the EU was very much real and part of Erdogan's foreign policy, this has shifted over time in the sense that also the EU has given President Erdogan a fair few times the cold shoulder. And I think the relationship after sort of the migration deal took a significant downturn, mainly because Turkey felt exploited by sort of a rushed policy to sort of enhance cohesion within the EU on something that remains one of the most hot portfolios and that creates the most divisiveness within the EU bloc. So it has been a difficult one. That being said, as it has also been mentioned, I don't think Erdogan has any plans in the near term for EU accession. That is a very closed chapter. And similarly, while, as it has also been mentioned before, there is definitely an optimistic sort of perspective, and there might be a boost for momentum with relations with the EU in case of a Kılıçdaroğlu win. I think accession talks would be sort of the last point on a long political agenda with much easier topics to tackle in case to start a warming up of relations again.
What about you, Mr. Ethan Dinscher? What do you think about EU's accession again? As Valeria Scuto was saying that perhaps it would be more relaxed, to discuss EU accession, Turkey's EU accession.
As your guest had just mentioned, I think this is a closed chapter, and a last possible option, no matter if Erdogan or Kılıçdaroğlu wins. If we see a Kılıçdaroğlu win, we will definitely, as people have said in the past, see a more warm relationship with the EU and America. However, I don't think accession is on the cards, no matter who wins. As was just mentioned, with the migration deal kind of going sour, there is still quite a lot of animosity between the EU and Turkey. And we also see this on the NATO side as well, with the Sweden and Finland kind of conflicts and tensions that have been happening over the past year. And the EU is very attentive to that and is very knowledgeable and has been paying attention to what President Erdogan is currently saying in his rhetoric and discourse towards
So we're
the Union.
watching these live footage of Erdogan greeting the rally in Ankara. He's walking from a balcony actually just to greet. It is expected that he will give a speech or perhaps a press conference in which he's going to interact on the latest results that have been portrayed by various news agencies and mainly from the state-run agency ANA and the opposition one. It seems that the count rate is 96.41%. Erdogan seems to lead the election.
It does seem to be joining in the crowds singing outside that presidential complex alongside his wife there, Emine Erdogan. More than 96% of the vote have been counted. Let's listen to what he has to say.
This is the result of this love. This is the meeting of the lovers. Today we are celebrating the results of this marathon. Some of them are in the kitchen and we are in the balcony.
Maşallah. Aziz milletim.
My august nation,
Ekranları başında bizleri izleyen kıymetli vatandaşlarım.
dear citizens who watch us in front of their TV screens, dear citizens of Ankara, dear friends at COS,
Sizleri
I would like to greet you all wholeheartedly
hürmetle, muhabbetle
with
selamlıyorum.
love, respect and affection.
Ülkemiz 14 Mayıs seçimleriyle
Our country
demokrasi şölelini de alnının akıyla
has
tamamlamıştır.
experienced another festival of democracy with the 14th of May elections.
Henüz kesin sonuçlar belli olmamakla beraber
Although the final results are not there yet, we are leading in the elections.
Hem yurt içi oyların gayri resmi sonuçlarının belli olmasının hem
The unofficial results
biraz daha vakit alacağı anlaşılıyor.
have been announced, but it seems that the votes counted abroad will take some time to be announced officially. However, there are some politicians who are claiming that they are leading in the election, so we are not like those people who are trying to deceive our nation.
Biz milletimize karşı hep
We have always been honest and sincere towards our nation, and even today we know that we are leading far away in the elections. However, we don't know the final results, and since the final results are not announced officially, we are expecting the reflection of the national will. As we have been waiting for the final results, the official results, we once again organized our traditional balcony speech in order to meet with all of you. What a love this is, what an excitement this is, what a love this is.
Sözlerimi İstanbul'dan Ankara'ya ve buraya
At the outset of my remarks, I would like to start by thanking all our citizens, all my brothers and sisters from Istanbul to Ankara, who always stood with us and never left us alone. Likewise, I would like to thank everyone, every one of our observers who took part in the ballot boxes or our volunteers who held on to the ballot boxes. And I also would like to thank our brothers and sisters who undertook duty abroad as well. Without a doubt, our greatest thanks go to the Turkish nation, the Turkish people who took part in the elections by breaking records. And I would like to thank every one of our citizens who reflected their will in the election process. I would like to thank every one of our citizens for voting in this election. I also would like to extend my best regards to my brothers and sisters who voted for us, AK Party and the People's Alliance. Beyond the percentages, it is without a doubt that our nation has won this election. Our people has won this election. The Republic of Turkey highly participated elections in our history. And we have seen that our people rushed to the ballot boxes and voted for their future. So we have completed this election without significant losses.
Bu gerçeği tüm parti temsilcilerinin gözetimi altında yürütülen
This is a fact. The election process has been carried out under the observation of all the political party representatives, and we have proven it once again. The brothers and sisters, the administrators of the Republican People Party, and some of the mayors from the CHP
kendi iç hesaplaşmalarının ürünü feveranları bu gerçeği değiştirmiyor.
Indeed
Ülkemiz
acted by taking into consideration their own political mileage. However, our country has been exemplary so far in terms of the trustworthiness of the election results. So we will never allow anyone to destroy the reputation of our election process for their own political mileage. Throughout our political life, we have always shown respect to your decision and the decision of the national will. And we also show respect to the national will and the national decisions. And from now on, in the upcoming elections, we will continue to show our respect to the national will as well. The People's Alliance know its business, and you have done your share. And we are expecting the same level of democratic maturity from everyone. The discussions during the election process are over, so everyone has said their words to our nation, and our nation has decided today. So from now on, there is no need to hush up and cover or find excuses to the results. And we will see all together what the decision of our nation is when the official results are announced. My dear brothers and sisters, independently from the results, our nation, approximately 27 million of our citizens, have chosen us as the president, and I would like to thank every one of them for choosing me. It doesn't matter which candidate they have chosen. Approximately 56 million of our citizens have participated in this festival of democracy, and I would like to thank every one of them. In the elections, we have won more than 2.6 million of the votes with our closest competitors. After the official results are announced, I certainly believe that this difference will be even higher. Due to the fact that our election system requires 50% plus one of the votes, that's why we don't know whether the election process is over in the first round. If the decision of our nation shows that the first round is enough to announce the president, there is no problem whatsoever. However, if our nation has decided to proceed with the runoff election, we welcome it as well. We certainly believe that we will win the elections in the first round with receiving more than 50% of the votes. Because we know that the votes abroad are still counted. That's why we request from our political party members and all our brothers and sisters who dedicated their hearts to us to hold on to the ballot boxes as the counting process is still going on. We should not be falling into despair, or we should show no weakness whatsoever, which might cast a shadow on our victory. Even in the current situation, we have seen that we have also won the majority in the parliament as the People's Alliance. So right now, People's Alliance have the majority in the parliament. And the People's Alliance also has prevailed in all the parliamentary commissions. That's why we also believe that our nation most probably will be choosing stability and also security when it comes to the presidential candidates as they have chosen the People's Alliance in the parliament. I hope and pray that the election results will be auspicious for our country and for our people. During this election process, we have visited many squares and we have given many promises and we have yielded the results. What did we say in the squares during the election process? Are we ready? We will become one. Thanks to God, we have strengthened our position in the hearts of our people and we have become one. We will become great. Thanks to God, by strengthening our country, we have become even greater. We said we will become firm. Thanks to God, we have cleaned the dark clouds collapsing on the superiority of the national will, and we have become much firmer. And we said we will become brothers and sisters, and independently from their decisions, we have come to this day as brothers and sisters, as 85 million citizens. Pay attention, we have never walked this path together with the terrorists.
Biz Diyarbakır'daki Kürt kardeşlerimizin ölümüne neden olan Selo'yla beraber
We
olmadık.
didn't cooperate and collaborate with Selahattin, who caused the lives of 51 of our Kurdish brothers and sisters in Diyarbakir. We didn't walk this path together with those who said that they will be breaking the doors of the prisons in order to release the baby murderers, and we didn't collaborate with those who received their orders from Kandil Mountain. Dear brothers and sisters, we receive our orders only from our God and our nation. And we said, all together we will become Turkey, and thanks to God, in 81 of our provinces and in the geography of our hearts, together with our brothers and sisters, we have become great and strong Turkey. Let me reiterate once again, the election results are not official, but this doesn't change the fact that the majority of our people have chosen us. Whatever we have said to our nation, we will continue to say the same thing. Are we ready? We will become one with a louder voice. We will become one. We will become great. We will become firm. We will become brothers and sisters, and all together we will become Turkey. So with this understanding, in the upcoming 5 years, we will continue to serve to our nation. I certainly believe that. Dear brothers and sisters, of course, every election in Turkey is important, and due to the future and the traits of the alliances and due to the sources of the support given to those alliances, 14th of May elections have been very important as well. The ones who experienced this election will tell their sons and their daughters, grandsons and granddaughters what kind of a political climate Turkey has been during this election.
Ülkemizin demokrasi ve kalkınma atılımlarını yarım bırakmamak için
in order to make sure that our country is developing economically and democratically, our nation has stood for its will. In order to make sure that the brotherhood and the unity and togetherness of this nation is not destroyed, our nation has foiled many games. And the ones who experience this election will tell the future generations what kind of an epic struggle they have won. So we are writing history today. So together with all our brothers and sisters present here, I would like to thank every member of our People's Alliance, and I would like to call upon every individual of this country. As of this morning, for the century of Turkey, and in order to make sure that we are raising the hopes of our young people to the peak, we will start working again. So in the upcoming period, we will not fall into any provocations. We will continue to work only in order to win the hearts of our people, and we will be striving for the establishment of strong and great Turkey. Do not forget, no one can prevent us from building strong and great Turkey. Once again, I hope and pray that 14th of May Democracy Festival would be auspicious. I wish all of you a wonderful evening. May you all stay in health.
So we were watching live the speech of Recep Tayyip Erdogan to his supporters, who he thanked and harked back to the claims of leading or misleading results in the elections. As a reference to the opposition, he underlined the importance of this election and the international attention it got. He spoke about people's and Turkey's victory to decide their fate under the supervision of the opposition itself and international media, as well as international observers and watchers. He praised the results and underlined his transparency, saying that he won't accept any tarnishing of the image of the democracy in their country. In a reference to the opposition as well, he said he expects democratic maturity from everyone. He awaits the official results with relief, no matter the outcome. And he said that his nation chose democracy and participated in a democratic ceremony. He expressed his strong belief of winning the majority since they won the majority in parliament as an indicator to the people choosing stability and continuity. He affirmed that his country is heading with stable steps towards development and prosperity by God's will, citing his country's independent and sovereign decisions. The majority chose the ruling party to become one and unified as well as firm. And before Ethan Dincher leaves us, I would like to give you the final word to comment about the speech of Erdogan here.
Yeah, so I think that this is very obviously in line with Erdogan's rhetoric historically. We do have to be aware, though, that these results are not final, even though Erdogan did allude to it. Although he did say that the results are not final, we do have to realize that that 50% plus one has not yet been reached yet. So for Erdogan to be saying that that we have kind of won, that this is the people's choice, we need to take with a grain of salt, that we need to realize that it is very likely that these elections will go into a runoff, even if there is kind of a delayed diaspora vote. Currently, where, as the screen shows, 96.49%, Erdogan is very close to that 50%, but given that it is night and the vote count is slowing down, I think that this is a speech traditionally in line with what we are all familiar, how Erdogan speaks. So that's what I would say finally. And obviously, we do know, even though Erdogan has said that there this is a kind of test of democracy, we should also consider what the opposition is saying in terms of ballots not being counted in certain areas or fraud being counted. We don't know if these are true or not, but the fact that they are still being said so loudly by the opposition is something that needs to be looked into.
Very nice indeed. Thank you so much, Ethan Dinsher, for being with us in this special coverage. And back to you, Mr. Serkan Oral. Do you think that there will be a democratic maturity by the opposition, as Recep Erdogan just cited here in his speech, or there will be a fuss and perhaps they will not take the defeat that easily, or perhaps the same goes for Recep Erdogan if the opposition wins, although in his speech he did say that no matter the outcome, we will respect the results?
Well, this is a traditional balcony speech. Every 3-4 years he made. Last 22 years, when he became prime minister, who born a child born at that time now, he's 22 years old. Think that all the life passed with Erdogan and the opposition parties, they came together to defeat him. 9 different parts, but they couldn't. You know, this is a very heartwarming speech with singing for the People's Alliance. But on the other side, the opposition parties are so angry now. Even AK Party people are happy, smiling, but Mr. Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu did a speech that don't block our votes. This means, of course, Mr. Tayyip put a reserve there that maybe he couldn't get the presidency tonight. But the point is that even he has the majority in parliament. That is also important for Turkish presidency system. For this time, this means the presidency system approved by Turkish people, and they will not have power to change the agreement there. Think that the opposition parties, including the party linked with the terrorists in the east part of Turkey, hope inshallah we will have no struggle around there, but there are news about coming from some polls about these struggles. But by the daytime we will see. And also the main opposition, Mr. Kemal and his followers, they are still angry, and we can see that maybe this will be a second round in 15 days. But as Erdogan mentioned to the Turkish people, you gave us the parliamentary majority, then don't let us separate the power and give me that the other one. So that the 5-point Mr. Ogan will be maybe a key player for 15 days to support either Erdogan, either Kılıçdaroğlu. We will see that.
Very nice. And let me include Ms. Valeria Scuto to tell me about her impression about this speech. And what do you think of the reference of international observers being there, as well as international media, and the line in that this democratic process was transparent for everyone, and including the opposition need to take it with certain maturity? Do you think that the West will accept the results no matter what? Be it Erdogan winning or the opposition?
I think defining accept is difficult, but I think there is faith in the transparency for the most part of the electoral process. Erdogan's speech is very much in line with his political communication style. It currently serves two purposes of reassuring his own electorate, of the prospect of winning in a second round, but at the same time sort of leaves room for highlighting the possibility of victory tonight. And I think the reference to democracy and to the votes casted and how this was a success for Turkey as a democratic state is something that Erdogan is highlighting, both in reference to domestic concerns as well as international concerns. I think the West is observing as an interested party, but not one that wants to meddle within the politics or the results of these elections. I think it is quite standard practice to send international observers, and they have been a small sort of contingent, as in very high-profile elections. So I think definitely this was potentially a message and a nod to their presence in the country, but I think at the same time this was very much a message domestically, because of how seriously these elections have been taken by the Turkish electorate and the importance of the vote as a primary pillar of a democratic state.
Very nice indeed. And we are now joined live via Skype by Dr. Hamoud Salhi, Associate Dean of International Education and Syria International Officer at California State University. Thank you for agreeing to be with us, Professor. And could you tell us to what extent can certain files, for example, the refugee file, be logical when we say that the opposition is going to perhaps get rid of them or send them outside the country? Is this some kind of electoral, let's say, flirtation with the people, and something that they cannot actually materialize in the ground, seeing the international conventions they have?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Karim, and I see Dr. Toomey there, so I'm so glad we've been with your guests. I think we are entering in the electoral phase for the second round. On many levels, this is a win for Turkish democracy, but there has to be some kind of a disappointment. And President Erdogan was expected, at least was expected to do, like his counterpart, the alliances, the other alliances, to be a tight race. But we were hoping, at least in some corners, that President Erdogan won. So the speech really underscores that momentum where we are going to give us another sort of to put us back on track. That this was maybe a disappointment, but we still have the 2 weeks. I think this was how this will shape up from my perspective for the next round. For the next 2 weeks, so probably today and tomorrow, the two groups will look at the alliances, who voted, who didn't vote. Certainly for President Erdogan, the strategy, the campaign strategy worked to a degree that they won in places where they were expected to win. The biggest challenge was in the big cities, Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir. There, where you have a strong sort of alliance showing, and if you follow the politics of the big cities like Istanbul, there is the political culture of the political parties that uses that has a lot of privileges in front of it. The alliances that form between the party and the commercial or the business class, all of those, you have some privileges that come with taking over or being in charge of the mayors of these big cities, winning the local elections. So perhaps that's one of the challenges that President Erdogan will have. For the opposition, they also won because they were not expected to be in this position. They were disorganized, the fragmented, The alliance had only one common goal, which is to go after the personality of President Erdogan. They didn't have a strategy, economic strategy, or a plan to do. On the refugee camps, to your question, the idea that, get rid of them, that is too simplistic, but it serves a purpose. It serves to rally the base that they have. Now that they are in the second round, I think for them they need to refocus their campaign, and a refugee issue will remain a major issue. But the refugee is a serious question because, number one, it has severe implications on the relationship with Syria, on the relationship with Europe, and more than anything else, the group that composed the refugees themselves. Remember, these refugees came after the 2011. A lot of them were born there, so there is the issue of nationalities. Is Turkey now going to give the Syrian diaspora or the Syrian diaspora citizenship? Certainly, they might. That's one thing to consider. Second thing, that the refugees, because of their large number, we're talking about 3.5 million, are also involved in the business of the country. You go to Istanbul and a lot of cities, and where a lot of them are, they have businesses. They also have. They are working. A lot of them are involved in industries and the economic sector are productive. So you have those two. You also have to consider. The third one is the refugees themselves. Some may not want to go back to Syria. Some may want to go somewhere else. They are asking to. They may be asking to a different country. So it is a serious questions, and it requires a long-term strategy. The opposition, particularly, will take two things in common. One is that it has to maintain the cohesive the base, and they have a strong base that show to the vote. So going against any other position will be difficult. And the second thing is they have to bring an alternative. The alternative is not certainly to get rid of them, because that might be an issue. And the third one, which is really the second work, is the second round is about trust in leadership. Now that we've seen the cards, we've seen people outside, the opposition has to come out and say and present itself as a credible. It has the solution, and the people will trust it. Certainly, as we've seen in the case of the earthquakes, the population in areas were affected supported Erdogan because of what he had in place for them. In other words, the policy that is there. So trust is a very serious issue. And unfortunately, from my perspective, when you look at the number, that will be something that the opposition has to work on. Erdogan has the ability, has earned the respect and the support of the Turkish people. He has certainly the credibility. And when he runs to another candidate, that might be a serious issue. Sorry, Kamal, I give you a big answer, a long one.
It's a very good answer indeed. Thank you so much. And just to give the final word to Dr. Abdel-Nour Toumi, do you think that the opposition will take the defeat in case they lose the election? They will take it with an open heart and without making a fuss, saying perhaps the elections was rigged?
Maybe not with an open heart, but in the end of the day, they will consider. I mean, any loser from this beautiful fight, and again, it is, as President Erdogan stated in his speech, it is a festival of democracy, and indeed, it is a festival not only of democracy, not only for Turkey, but for the entire region. Nonetheless, Turkey, unfortunately, will come out divided because of the high tension between the two projects that were in the campaign of, the central of the campaign of this election. But in the end of the day, I personally, I will congratulate the Turkish people for their lesson of democracy to the entire world.
Very nice.
It makes us we, the Middle Eastern, the Easterners, will make us proud.
And just to be fair there, I would like to give a final word to Ms. Valera Escuto and Serkan Ural. Ms. Valera Escuto, you may begin.
Well, I'd like to follow up on the beautiful words to say that this has been indeed a very respectful, democratic process, and so far something that we will keep looking at for the next couple of weeks, and it'll be a tight race, and we'll definitely have to wait the next couple of days to sort of see how and what future will be shaping up for Turkey.
And Mr. Serkan Ural?
Economical and political power Turkey will be more friendly and brotherly to the rest of the world, to the African countries and the Arab world, the Gulf countries, even Balkans and the Caucasia. So we are willing to move forward the relations after the passing elections.
And Professor Hamoud Salhi?
I think it's a historical elections on many levels. The Turkish people showed that they can handle this. There were a lot of concern about external interference, the link, the alliance of the Nation Alliance under Kemal, where sort of brought the issue of interference of the Russian that was handled by the Erdogan's group very nicely. I think this is the moment where the Turkish people have to be proud. Of course, the work is not done. I think it's getting exciting now. At least we have something to look at, to watch for, and in the end, it's Turkish people will win.
Thank you so much to all my panel of guests for these insightful analysis. And with this, our program comes to an end for tonight. Thanks to all of you who have been keeping it here on our channel. And with this, we leave you. Take care.